Okay, welcome to our next uh, installment of our Ladies Who Lunge. And I'm super, 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 super excited because Karen Washington is here. And so as soon as I can bring the two of us on screen at the same time, but we were doing a little, of course, there's always like some kind of technology issue that, we had. So between the two of us, but Karen is one smart dame, one smart cookie, and we figured it out. So I very much appreciate your patience, and, that's why you're a superstar. So I know Karen from the New York Botanical Garden. I'm sure at some point we probably worked together, maybe on some things at Brooklyn Botanic Garden also. But um, I am just she's been a shero of mine forever, and so I know her through Metro Hort. Karen is a trustee of the New York Botanic Garden. I'm going to read a little bit about her bio for everyone. But hello, Karen. Thank you. This is a Sunday, so it's a big day. She's got a lot going on at her gardens. But overall, Karen Washington is a political activist. She's a community organizer, and she fights for food justice. A woman after my own heart. Karen grew up in New York City. She attended Hunter College and received her master's in occupational biometrics and ergonomics from New York University. And she's also was a physical therapist for over 30 years. She so-called retired in April 2014 to start the Rise and Root Farm. Um, she's this is like unbelievable to me also. She studied organic gardening at the Center for Agroecology and Sustainable Food Systems at UC Santa Cruz in 2006. So after many years of tending a garden in her own backyard, Karen helped found the Garden of Happiness in the Bronx. And I think that's where a lot of people were first introduced to Karen. A decade later, that garden team sort of worked with other community gardens in New York City to launch a farmer's market. And I'll let her tell you about Mayor Giuliani and some of the things that went on with those hijinks in that time. But Karen began her apprenticeship at the Roxbury Farm in Kinterhook, New York, and then she retired to co-found the Rise and Root Farm. And later I'll put up all their social media so that you can look into all of these successful endeavors and donate. In 2018, rather than using the term food desert, she coined the intersectional term food apartheid, which I've used that term also, Karen. I love it. And she brings attention to social inequalities and injustices in the entire food system. So she's been active with the Farm School NYC, the Black Urban Growers, and the Rise to Root. So in 2012, also, she was named Ebony's Power 100 of influential African Americans, and in 2014 received the James Beard Foundation Leadership Award. So that's a lot. And usually I don't read all of everyone's bio, but it's so impressive, Karen, what you've done and how you've built layers, and building on these foundations. So, with that said, I just want to open up because so many of the people who watch and view Ladies Who Lunch, and I created it for women who are so inspiring to us, but they want to know how can they once they learn about you and hear about you, how can they do this in their own communities? Like, what got you going to know that you could even accomplish this?
Well, thank you so much for having me. That's a difficult and a sort of an easy question. I think, first of all, I had great parents who stood up and they, were involved in the civil rights movement. And my father joined many protests and he became a leader within his own right. He was always like the president of the building association, and then we moved to a co-op. He was the captain of that association. So my parents always, when they saw injustice, taught my brother and myself to speak up, to say something, not to just sit back and be idle. And I think I brought that with me when I moved to the Bronx and started growing food, or when I became a physical therapist and I saw the difference in how people were treated based on the color of their skin, based on how much money they had, and based on where they lived. So, and
So
so there are people out there that may be on the sideline and they want to, or seem reluctant to say something, but your voice is very powerful and you can make a difference.
yeah, I do. I mean, it's probably a story for another day, but I do feel that unfortunately in this political environment and given social media what it is, that there's a lot of people who feel silenced, that they're afraid to say something, which is the biggest, tragedy that I think can happen to, our great democracy. And yet, on the other hand, I see people, still marching. I have friends from BBG that'll say, as women, we're still marching, we're still out there, we're still doing it. But I think that makes a big difference. But for lack of a better term, you got in there and you got your hands dirty. You started these community gardens and things that, at a time in New York City when a lot of people didn't think they were going to last. I know Giuliani tried to take them back, and everybody from Bette Midler to whatever, to yourself, fought for these. So the joke always was he could get the mafia or the Cosa Nostra, but he couldn't get the city gardeners that we kept the gardens. So, what prompted you to say, I am going to grow food? I'm going to take these abandoned lots or whatever and work?
Well, I think it was a bunch of us. I think especially at a point in time when this was happening, mostly in low income neighborhoods and communities of color, where people with power and privilege they left. They left to the suburbs, and the people that could not move stayed behind. And the choices was eminent: either we just sit back and let things happen, or we're going to come together and change the neighborhood. And so many of us, with this just our hands and sweat equity,
Mm,
went into these empty lots and turned them into community gardens. And I always tell the story that at first the intention really wasn't about growing food, but it was really taking back our neighborhood from the blight, the decay, the hopelessness that was there,
mm,
and being inspired to turn something that was horrible into something that was beautiful, to provide a safe haven for both our seniors and our children, but
yeah.
then also to really show the resiliency and the pride that we had. Often, poor communities and unserved communities are always looked at in the negative light. And I think with these community gardens and urban farms, what they did was bring light and joy and love
Yeah.
in neighborhoods that for so long were neglected.
I found that the same thing, Karen, when I would be a judge every year for the greenest block in Brooklyn contest. And what they found is that when people have gardens, they come out, they help one another, they look out for one another, the crime rate goes down, and the sense of community increases.
Correct.
Yeah. So when you started these community gardens, which led to farms and so on, did you have to purchase the places, or were they part of the community that you just started taking care of?
The problem at that time in the early 1980s and late 1970s is that the city still was going through a financial crisis, and they did not have the manpower nor the finance to take care of close to over 1,000 vacant lots.
Mm.
And so it was the community themselves that got together, and turned these empty lots into community gardens. They did at one point in 1978 started Operation Green Thumb, which was a city organization that helped control the lots. In other words, with this organization, you could get a license. At that time was a license agreement. You would be able to get fencing, lumber, some plants, and some soil to
Oh,
start with, and that was the very beginning. And they contribute the founding of these community gardens to a woman named Liz Christie, who in the early 1970s in the Lower East Side, along with her community, really engaged in turning empty lots into, sorry, I'm in New York
That's
City,
okay.
empty lots and into community gardens. And so again, um, there is an organization called Operation Green Thumb. It's now called Green Thumb that was instrumental in letting the city know that these were operational green spaces and that there needed to be an agency that would oversee it.
Mm,
But as we go along the conversation, they had their pitfalls as well.
yeah. So when you start off, so thank you for that. And then, but when you get together as a group, and you obviously are a natural born leader, but did you find that you just automatically jumped in, or was there a lot of hierarchy and, sort of, I mean, I worked in a lot of startup, corporate companies, so to speak, and it's everyone does a little bit of everything in the beginning. It's only like later when there's a lot of layers that go into it that all the rules come into it. So I'm wondering, when you started off, I mean, you're a trailblazer. Did you just step in and everybody did what they had to do, and you were the leader, or was there some, business plan that went along with?
You know what? I try to not let myself be quote the leader. I'm the
Yeah,
type of person that, this is a community garden, so every voice must be heard, and everyone has a role in the community garden. There's some people who are good at organizing, some people are good at finance, some people are good at, you know, growing food, some people are good as being construction workers in the garden. So um, you need to go in with the idea that you're bringing different voices with different experiences to make the garden work. And so you consider yourself a leader when you can bring people together as one and you can help them tackle a particular problem. But as far as the community garden, I think that's why they call them community garden, because it's not one person that leads, it's a community of voices that lead. And so I've always felt myself that whatever I do, I have the backing of the voices of my community gardeners and what I have to say and what I have to do.
which is brilliant. And you still, I guess you lead by example also, because somebody still has to have the final arbitration. But I was sucking wind for a minute because I was thinking, like, you could be Danny Meyer of, like, the urban farming, because you could also, I mean, maybe if you want to monetize this, Karen, but I'm thinking, if you had a roadmap or a blueprint of how to do this for others, and you give these webinars and talks and things, but it would be a way for people to um, sort of purchase your way, and learn from you, because I mean, clearly there was, there was challenges and maybe mistakes along the way.
Sure.
Yeah,
All
but
right, so some advice I would give people is so when you're working in a city, and a city has ownership of land, number one, you have to make sure that you understand. So turn that information. So you understand if the city owns the land and it's and there is a political element with that land. First of all, understanding your power,
mm,
because even though the city owns the land, you're the city. I mean, the city doesn't exist without its people. So that's
exactly.
number one. So understanding the power that you have, reverse that psychology and thinking that the city, controls the land, but you are the city. That's number one. And
People.
number two, learn the politics of the city. And what I mean by that is that I had to learn one-on-one city civics, like who controls. So in New York City, there's different levels of
Hmm.
engagement within the political system. First starts with your community board,
Hmm.
knowing your community board, going to community meetings, because each community board in New York City has a land use section.
I
And
see.
going to the community board and be very outspoken to let them know that your garden is on their radar. And then also you have a council person. You have a council person, and the council person can definitely provide discretionary funding for your garden and also speaks for you within your particular district. So I had to understand that. The next level, the next layer is your assembly person. Your assembly and your state senators and then your congressmen. And knowing those elements of the political ladder gives you an up. Like everybody knows me because I make my I make it my day to make sure that I call and I visit and I invite and I encourage others to do the same thing because these gardens, these green spaces in most cities throughout the country are now being faced with development. You know,
Exactly.
as more people come into city, there's a balance between development and green space. And then how do we make sure that the balance is fair and just and that we continue to save these green spaces? And it's all falls along the political spectrum. And so I
Yes.
advise people that want to get involved in urban farming and in community gardens that to be mindful that there's a political aspect to it,
Yes.
and to not only think about growing food but think about getting your political people that you vote for involved in the process as well. So that's an advice that I give people right off the bat.
I mean, I share that with you that, food is a prism. You can see so much through it. It's politics, it's health care, it's wellness, it's race, it's justice, all of this all in one. And it takes a lot of work. I mean, people often say to me, well, I like whether it's your home or your books you write or your gardens. It takes so much work. I say, of course, everything that's good takes work. But then I have to ask you, as it comes to all this, and you have a family, um, how try women always have this dilemma that they're passionate about what they do and their work and their job, but how do you balance? I mean, I don't know if you were paid or if you want to say, but you want to do your passionate thing, you need to make money, you need to be in a family. How do you balance those things and still stay on top of being a leader?
A lot of it is faith-based too. I'm a very
Mm.
spiritual person. I'm not saying religious, but very spiritual.
Yeah.
And and I use that faith to keep me going. I was a single parent raising two children when I moved to the Bronx,
Oh, God bless.
and I used my faith and belief in myself in getting me through hard times and really relying on the strength of family members and friends to get you through
Yeah.
a lot of the hard times. But that you know, there's a burning desire to do the right thing. And then when you know it's right and you know you're doing the thing, there's this faith that helps you along the way. So it's definitely faith that has helped me during the down times. And the fact that I had a profession, I was very, very lucky that I had a profession that I love as a physical therapist, which allowed me the profession mainly was to restore function to people that were injured or infirm. And so you're looking at plants and you almost the same
Mm.
sort of care that you want to give to plants. And so I was lucky that I had an excellent job. I think the most important thing is that I wasn't beholden to the
Yeah.
nonprofit arena that
Yes.
at times is is in tune with funders. For example, many times a lot of my friends could not be outspoken in their beliefs because
That's true.
many of the organizations that they belong to were funded by organizations that were very conservative.
I
And so I never had that. I mean, knock on wood, I was never beholden to funders, and I always felt that as a physical therapist, I worked on my own. That I was able to speak my mind and say what I wanted to say without fear that I would say something that would be detrimental to an organization
yeah.
because I was outspoken. And a lot of my friends and colleagues fell in that trap. Behind closed doors, they were able to say what they wanted to say, but if they worked for a city agency or they worked for a nonprofit and they were getting money from conservative donors, they could not say exactly how they felt. But
I
for me, I
yeah.
always felt, I never felt that pressure.
So there is an and good for you, and that you can have that independence. And I think everyone would strive for that, both as an individual and as an organization, because there's freedom in having the money to be able to do what you need to be, that you need to operate, and not relying on bigger money, as you say. So God bless you for that. But also, if so, looking so that's so very worth noting, and I encourage everyone who wants to do this to try to be able to set up a pattern similar to what Karen has done, where you can stay true to your goals. I guess really is the way to think about it, but also to attract people who believe in the same principles and philosophies that you do. So I encourage people, like I said, we'll put it up at the end, but maybe you talk about the future a little bit, and you're like you had been through some dire times in New York. You'd seen some, pretty crummy stuff along the way, but yet you always remained hopeful. And so, looking ahead, what do you see for the future of what I see as young urban farmers? I think, you know, the sense of urban in America is expanding. I think suburbia is really not going to be suburbia for very long. People crave, and I think the coronavirus and the pandemic only accentuated this, where people crave to be with others. They want to be in an environment like that. So, but they need their green spaces and so on. So, looking at it from your vantage point and your purview, what do you see going forward as, now we have the impact of climate chaos and things like that, but what's going to challenge you, or what's going to find you hopeful uh, looking ahead?
So at this point in time, I consider myself an elder. I have the title as Mama K,
Oh,
as people call me now, and I wear it proudly, that title and that
well,
label, because I see hope. I see the light at the end of the tunnel. I see so many young people that are fighting for justice, not only food justice but social justice, ending racism. I think this, when we're talking about the food movement, people are questioning a food movement where we are one of the richest country in the world, but yet we have hunger, poverty, and homelessness. How does that happen?
how
How
does
do
that?
we have a section of people who don't have access to healthy food options? Why is it in low-income neighborhoods there are high incidence of diet-related diseases? Why is it there we have a system with the haves and have-nots? And so as the country starts to blend and become more diverse, it's the young people. I'm very hopeful with the young people
Me too.
because the problems are no longer local. The problems are global. And
That's
it's through social media that is happening, where young people are talking not within their local community, but they're talking country to country,
exactly.
and they are recognizing the ills of past administrations and past legacies,
Yeah,
and they don't want to replicate as an oppressive system of exploitation and extraction. They want to make sure that there's more voice and more common ground when it comes to diversity and inclusion. So I'm very, very hopeful. I go around speaking to so many young people about my experience, but also about the youth leadership. It's the youth leadership that's going to lead this country into a new direction as they fight both food insecurity, climate change, racial inequality. These are things that are on their plate, and they are definitely going to bring it to the forefront. I think with social media, everything is wide open. When I grew up, everything was just localized,
yeah,
and you were in your own silo. That's not the point at this point in time, and I'm very hopeful. The marches in the streets, these defiant young people who will not let things die down. They want to know the truth. I think we need to, again, as a country, re-examine how we got here, re-examine how this country was built, re-examine when it comes to critical racial theory. We need to talk about how this country was built on the backs of enslaved and indigenous people. And we need to have those hard conversations so that everyone feels that they have participated in the development of this country and it is not white centered, and that there are voices that for so long have been silent and they need to be heard on how this country was built, the trauma that the country, in the past have has placed on people, and we need to reckon that so that we can move forward, so we
I
can move
agree.
forward as a country.
It's not a zero sum game. I mean, I don't understand people that say, I don't want to hear that part because this was what we were taught before. It's like, but we can expand. It's like, to me, I like, not being Pollyannish, but I think it's like love. It's like we can have both things at the same time. And so, I think it adds to our cultural heritage that we have. And I think we've already made some really significant steps just within the last year that a long time coming. But I think it's going to continue because the Pandora's box is open, and I think it's not going to stop. So I think that is one good thing. But I also really embrace what you're saying about the young people, and everyone looks to them for the next generation, especially when it comes to climate chaos. I mean, I'm a horticulturist, and we grow a lot of our own food and things too. But I've seen from an international standpoint how, you know, the you know the powers that be, they do take away some countries' ability to grow their own food and to be empowered, and the supply chains and what it does to them, which is, like another whole, hour conversation. But people sometimes wonder, why can't people grow their own food? It's like, because we took it away from them. So I think that every area we have to get, I mean, I always espouse eating local. I mean, my books have done that. It's drinking local. I have other books that do that. But I think that people have to think about that. And then, like you said early on, is like with the community gardens, is that you take things back. Like, you're empowered, but it's going to take work. I mean, it's not easy doing this.
No, it's not easy doing it, but it takes a village, and that's just why they call them community garden. They're not one person garden. It takes a group of people to make
Yeah.
things work, and it's happening. And
So
I'm
when
I'm
you
glad
did
that I was part of it.
the root to rise,
Rise and Root
sorry, the
Farm.
rise in the root farm. I'm doing my yoga in my head, root to rise. But when you have the rise and root farm, and I'm thrilled that, and I honestly didn't know this, but I can get this at my Union Square green market. I just have to order ahead. Is that
Yeah,
help?
well, we were hit by Ida. Um, Tragically, we were hit when Ida hit September 1st. When Ida hit the Northeast, it
Yeah.
devastated our farm. It wiped out our farm. So right now we have a GoFundMe to help
Okay. Okay.
get things back. But we're getting there. We just had I tell you, like I said, it takes a community. We had so many people in our community come up and help us take away, some of the and compost some of the um, plants that didn't
So
survive in our field. They helped clear our field. And so now we're in the process of planting, putting in our fall crop, our winter crop. And so it looks like, we're going to make it for the season. We'll be able to have some greens and some root vegetables for the winter and spring.
excellent.
Um, and so, but lessons learned. People ask time and time again. So you're an expert when it comes to farming, and I said the only expert is Mother Nature, because
Exactly.
in one year you can grow the best, vegetables and fruits, and then the next year devastation happens. And so we were on our road to have a great year when Ida hit. And so it just tells us sometimes we need to step back and pause
Yeah.
and take a break and reflect, and again, it was our community that stepped forward to help us. So
Thank God.
again, lessons to be learned, in any sort of business. There are hard times, and so many, with COVID and with the hurricanes. There's so many people that have
I know.
lost
But
so much. And so as a
so
society, we need to sit back and reflect on that.
I think, my brother's a musician, and his area is out in Western New Jersey, Lambertville area, and so on. The studios, the musicians, they lost so much. But this goes back to the climate chaos issue, and like we have to be more prepared for this. I do this with my garden design clients also. But this is another reason why I started the Ladies Who Lunge, is because when we, in the before times, we could get together, we talk, we network, we share ideas, and I think, doing these kinds of things, like the interviews here, that we can learn from one another. We need to continue doing like what you're saying with the youth and speaking to them, where they use social media for good, not for, you know, for other things. But I, before we go, I do, because we're running into time here, and I know it's getting dark, but I do want to point out to everyone who hasn't already signed up for Karen's. She has a American Horticultural Society webinar that's online October 8th, and it's 4 o'clock. So you need to sign up for that for sure. And then I love this time, but she's doing the Mid Atlantic Hort Therapy on Saturday on the 9th at 10 a.m. So where can they go for more information for that? For
Yeah, well, um, yes, I guess it's the Mid Atlantic
okay,
Horticultural
okay,
Therapy Association. And then I'll put one more plug. So
yeah.
again, I'm humbled that I'm going to get an award on Monday from the United Hospital Fund for my community service. I'm glad about that. And then on October 13th, Green Thumb, again, the agency that um, licenses the community guards in New York City, is giving me the Lifetime Achievement Award.
Oh, that's
So
excellent.
so
Oh,
many things are happening. So many things are happening in my life. That's happening the 13th. And then on the 15th, believe it or not, I'm having a big celebration as I move from New York to Georgia.
I
I'm
know.
moving to New York to Georgia. And so, but I'd still be farming up in New York State for the
Okay.
next 3 4 years. My my friends want me to farm the next 10 years. Yeah, okay, right. But anyway, I'll still have my roots in New York State.
Yes, you
But
can do
again,
it.
it just goes to show as an elder how you leave a legacy and you leave it in the hands of the next generation to continue the work, and that's so important. And
It is.
so I leave New York City with hope, love, and I know there's resilience, and it will go on for the next generation of leaders that will continue to grow um, food in New York City. So thanks
Oh,
for having me.
congratulations on that. I know when you said it, I think it was the last Metro Hort meeting or maybe Plantorama, that you were going to be retiring. And I thought, she can't retire. I mean, she's so young. She can't leave New York. I was like so sad. I'm like, maybe she'll change her mind, something. But I see what you say. And it's just like big corporations. They have what's that called, Bill? They have like the planning in place. You got bench strength, they call it, just like a sports analogy, is that you've laid the foundation for others to take over. So it's not a cult of personality, even though you're adored. And congratulations on all the latest. I mean, that is. Did you ever think you were going to be, like when you started off, like you would be so recognized like this?
I'm very humbled by it, and I don't try and draw the attention. I try to be very incognito
You
in a
are.
lot of the things. I really
Believe
do.
me, I am
I do.
so thrilled that you managed the time. I mean, to everybody, this is a Sunday, and so I'm going to post it. It's recorded live. But the fact that Karen took the time from her garden, there's people out there, they're doing their entertaining and so on. I am over the moon about this, that you can, help our viewers and listeners to better understand your own roots and where you came from. I love that your parents gave you that foundation that you can continue to give back to your community and to all of us. As I say in the sort of mission of Ladies Who Lunch, it's you. These inspiring women, they enrich our lives, and you certainly have enriched my own life, and I know you will enrich others as well. So, I toast you.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye bye. Cheers. Oh, we're gonna put up your GoFundMe page, so you have to let me know
Okay.
about. Okay.
We'll
The
just go fund the Rise and Root Farm.
Okay. I'll put that up so everybody can see it. All right. Take care, Karen. Hugs and
Okay.
kisses.
Okay.
Bye
Bye
bye.
now.